Hello and welcome to Batting Into Comics. My name is John Trent. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief at Batting Into Comics. And today I got a story about a rumor that claims to provide details about the alleged civil war that has been ongoing within Lucasfilm and Star Wars. So this rumor comes from WDW Pro at Pirates and Princesses. WDW Pro was the leaker who first detailed there was a civil war within Lucasfilm on the WDW Magic forums back in May 2020. So I'm going to tell you what that scoop was, and then we'll get into this new scoop that he revealed at Pirates and Princesses today. So in WDW Pro's initial scoop, he claimed there were two factions fighting over control of the studio, those behind Kathleen Kennedy and those behind Jon Favreau. He claimed, quote, "The ongoing battle over Lucasfilm's direction continues, with Kathleen Kennedy and Jon Favreau factions fighting over the studio. It's fairly well known at this point that the beef between Kennedy and Iger is real, given that Iger essentially ignored her in his memoirs. It's also hard to lose sight of how many projects Kennedy has seen fail at Lucasfilm. Star Wars Resistance, Star Wars Forces of Destiny, Star Wars Galaxies of Adventures, Solo, and the sequel trilogy falling in revenues with each release. While Favreau seemingly struck it out of the park with The Mandalorian, a series for Disney Plus, that even Iger was giving creative suggestions for and taking notes on each episode." He wanted to state, "Buried in the lead of Waititi directing a new Star Wars film, which Kennedy has no creative control over, was confirmation of the female-centric Star Wars series being helmed by former Weinstein personal assistant Hedlund. But be ready, because it looks almost certain that a new narrative is being pushed by Kennedy loyalists in Lucasfilm. And that narrative is that Hedlund was only a personal assistant for 1 year, and that being against her or her series is misogynistic, mean, and unfair." WDW Pro then claimed, again, "This is a conflict that Disney doesn't want. They don't want conflict over a hire that lavishly praised Weinstein, deleted hundreds of tweets at the same time as a leak about her project, and may know dirt on Iger and Eisner." With all that said, Kennedy has essentially gotten her way time after time, outplaying Iger, even if she has been hammered by segments of the fans, mostly by hiring and developing strong loyalty within her brand. So that was the scoop from May 2020, outlining this alleged civil war within Lucasfilm and Star Wars. So now WDW Pro is back discussing what this alleged civil war looks like. So WDW Pro claims there are actually three factions within Lucasfilm. He writes, "In reality, behind the doors of Lucasfilm is a fractured studio of three ideological divisions. There are the old-timers who remember the days of George Lucas. They are the apolitical, non-ideological artisans. For those, most have kept their heads down and tried to keep themselves from being fired or disparaged by the Kathleen Kennedy crew. The Kathleen Kennedy crew, on the other hand, are the hires since 2012, the ones who held the keys to the sequel trilogy, but now have been relegated to comic book releases and young adult novels. The third group is the Favreau-Filoni bunch. This new group is comprised of Favreau loyalists brought in and generally work outside the confines of Lucasfilm proper. They get to bypass Kennedy and the Kathleen Kennedy crew, and their budgets come straight from the top of Disney." Now, whether or not these factions are actually warring with each other over the direction of Star Wars and Lucasfilm isn't necessarily proven in the scoop. In fact, it appears that WDW Pro actually argues that the Civil War ended when Kathleen Kennedy's sequel trilogy films, specifically after The Last Jedi, was rejected by the movie-going public. As we reported, fans abandoned Star Wars, not just in the theaters with Solo, becoming the first Star Wars film to bomb at the box office, but also in merchandise sales. Even their new Star Wars-themed parks weren't bringing in people. With the Star Wars brand in decline following The Last Jedi, WDW Pro claims that Disney decided to give Jon Favreau complete control over The Mandalorian. WDW Pro writes, "A rare move was made to give Favreau complete control over The Mandalorian. Kennedy could only provide him with notes. She could not dictate anything about the series." Then, with the success of The Mandalorian, WDW Pro claims Favreau's faction became ascendant. While Kennedy became embittered over the success of the one Star Wars property she had no control over, her story group had essentially been gutted. He then goes on to detail that Kennedy continued to work on more series within Star Wars, but she would have no theatrical releases, and Favreau had complete control over whatever he wanted to do with the brand. Next, WDW proclaims that the ultimate catastrophe for Kennedy was the loss of Steven Spielberg as the director of Indiana Jones 5. The scooper states, This one was a stinging rebuke because it meant the man who had originally brought her into the fold had abandoned her. Kennedy's first major role had been as Spielberg's assistant on the original Indiana Jones. Now, decades later, she had lost his confidence. However, there are some major points that are missing in WDW Pro's analysis. If Favreau's faction is ascendant and Kennedy is not supposed to be getting any theatrical releases, then what faction does Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins' newly announced Rogue Squadron film fall under? The assumption is that Jenkins is a Kennedy hire, given the significant changes to Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman 1984 that include the removal of Diana using her sword and shield to combat criminals and villains, as well as the inclusion of a Donald Trump stand-in villain in Pedro Pascal's Maxwell Lord. The Rogue Squadron film is a major missing piece of WDW Pro's analysis and indicates Kennedy is not the powerless figurehead he makes her out to be, if indeed she is the one who brought in Jenkins for the Rogue Squadron film. And if that is part of Kennedy's film, it rebukes WDW Pro's claim that Kennedy would not be getting any theatrical releases following the sequel trilogy. Kennedy also appears to still be helming the Obi-Wan Kenobi series as well as the Cassian Andor series, not to mention the High Republic publishing initiative that WDW Pro claims the Lucasfilm Story Group has been relegated to is more than likely involved in Leslie Headland's Acolyte series, which is supposed to take place at the end of the High Republic. So are they really relegated to publishing initiatives when Disney Plus streaming shows are being made to connect to their publishing initiatives? Makes one question whether or not that Kennedy is really not in charge. Maybe the most interesting part of Pro's analysis is that he claims Favreau has complete control over The Mandalorian and has even rejected suggestions from Kathleen Kennedy. He claims, in one set of notes, she recommended going with Boba Fett as the lead character right out of the gate. Favreau overrode. He uses this to point to Kennedy's lack of creative control, but earlier in his analysis, he also claims that Rian Johnson had similar creative control with The Last Jedi. WDW proclaims, while Abrams had worked with Kasdan on the Force Awakens script, Johnson was working with the Lucasfilm Story Group in a way that not even J.J. Abrams was aware. For weeks, Rian Johnson would meet with Kiri Hart's story group behind closed doors, planning out a detour for The Last Jedi. Johnson admits he had creative control in an interview with Sci-Fi Wire. He told them, "It was very open. It ended up feeling in some strange way very similar as to when I had written my other films, in that there was a lot of space and freedom. We were always carrying the characters forward from the first movie, and we're starting off from the events of the first movie, and there's a trajectory to it, so it made sense they would go in this direction next. But in that context, it felt like I was able to find the movie that I cared about. It was a really nice writing experience." Johnson then went on to detail how he worked with the story group. "I actually moved up to San Francisco so I could meet a couple times a week with the folks at Lucasfilm. They call it their story group with Kiri Hart and a bunch of folks. I would go in and throw everything I was thinking of up on the whiteboard, and we would talk about it. That took away so much of the fear, I think. I'm not feeling alone in the process." But maybe the biggest piece of evidence that WDW Pro leaves out of his analysis is the claim from Favreau that the Mandalorian will build to the First Order, an organization introduced in the sequel trilogy. Back in 2019, Favreau spoke with Entertainment Weekly where he stated, "Also, what could happen in the 30 years between celebrating the defeat of the Empire and then the First Order? You come in on episode 7, the First Order are not just starting out, they are pretty far along. So somehow, things weren't necessarily managed as well as they could have been if the galaxy ended up in hot water again like that. So if Kathleen Kennedy has been relegated to this figurehead position in Lucasfilm because of the failure of the sequel trilogy, why would you embolden Favreau to create a show that ties directly in to the sequel trilogy? Makes one wonder if there really is a civil war between Favreau and Kennedy factions, if they're both working in the same continuity leading up to the sequel trilogy event. From the outside looking in, there does not appear to be a civil war raging in Lucasfilm. The company appears to be operating the same as it has since The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Creators are still attacking and deriding Star Wars fans on an almost daily basis. And the current product they are putting out has the same, if not more flaws than the sequel trilogy. Those flaws just aren't actively insulting you like Admiral Holdo lecturing Poe Dameron or Luke Skywalker cutting himself off from the Force and abandoning his nephew to the dark side and even attempting to kill him. Instead, what you have is the Mandalorian scoping out the Imperial stronghold on Navarro, ruthlessly executing all the stormtroopers in his path to rescue Baby Yoda. And then in an episode almost right before that one, he's running headfirst into a rhino den, doesn't scope it out, doesn't find any information about this animal, and gets absolutely owned. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever why you would have this character doing these two things that require planning so differently. And then on the other hand, you have Baby Yoda, which is probably the most marketable character because of his cute look, but his character is also has radical changes from episode to episode. In one episode, he's an idiot baby that just wants to play with the gear shift in the Mandalorian spaceship. In another, he's a trained Padawan who's learned under multiple Jedi Masters at the Temple on Coruscant. What's going on here? So there are problems with The Mandalorian, just as there are within the sequel trilogy. They just aren't as insulting yet. You've been watching Bounding into Comics. My name is John Trent. I'll have another video for you tomorrow.